This is going to show my age a bit, but when I was young, we had slides and a slide projector, and we used to sit down as a family and we'd go through the slides and talk about holidays and that sort of thing. So I know, right? In my defence, I was in an older family, so even though, anyway. So this is the holiday that was the last 40 years. So this is your holiday. You're viewing the slideshow of my life, which is a holiday. So this is my story. I've picked that background because it kind of reminds me a little bit of what my path has been like. There's a few left-hand turns and a few right-hand turns. The road's not straight and it's a bit up and down. So I'll just go to the next slide. This is what it should have looked like. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Some versions use the terminology, he will make your path straight. So either way you look at it, that's not exactly what's happened in my life up until now. So that's what it should have looked like, and I'll go through and show you what it actually did look like. So a friend of mine, on the left-hand side, if you can look at that first, I haven't had any time to transition my slides properly, but they put this up on Facebook. So tell me, where shall I go? To the left where nothing's right, or to the right where nothing's left? And it was a bit of a depressive statement. So on the your right-hand side, right-hand side is my reply. So I wrote, go left, the way back is always right, or go right where the way back is the one thing that's left. So I thought I was being a bit clever by that, but that's also a little bit of a glimpse of what my life's been like. So when I haven't gone the way God's wanted me to, I've always been able to find the way back. I started out putting these slides in chronologically, but that didn't work, so I'm going to kind of put them in boxes. So this is kind of the childhood box. This is me as a baby. Aren't I cute? Yep. They're the only two photos I have. So, and Mum assures me that it's me, even because I'm one of 10 kids. She assures me it's me because of the blanket. So, not because it looks like me, but because of the blanket. So it's definitely me because I'm lying on that blanket. Can you find me? That's my, I think I was about grade 1 there. So, right up the back next to one of the teachers on the right-hand side. That's me. Have I got a pointer? Woo! There we go. That's me there. That's me and my little brother. Not long after that photo was taken, I convinced him that it'd be a really good idea if he hopped in a rubbish bin and we could take a photo of him being Oscar the Grouch. That actually plays a little bit of a part later on because he's pretty easy to convince to do stuff like that, and I used to do it quite a bit. So, this is the church where I grew up. My first experience of church, I wouldn't say it was a fantastic one. That church to me signifies quite a judgmental church background. It's a Lutheran church, as you can see. People went to that church because that's what they did last Sunday. And that was my first experience of what church was like. It was very traditional. I wouldn't exactly call it family. If you didn't go to church, people talked about you, so everyone would go to church so they weren't talked about. So that's kind of the culture that I grew up in. We did go to church, but it wasn't a loving family type thing. Hopefully none of them are listening. So this is my family. I'll go through from youngest, that's Dad, and that's my mum. Then that's my eldest sister, Carolyn. Then we have Helen, and then Vic, and then Rhonda, and then Douglas there, Neville, and then Stephen, then Jen, myself, and my little brother over there. And that was the last time we got a photo taken together at my niece's wedding. and probably is likely to be the last photo we ever get taken again. So Dad's passed away now, so he obviously can't be in the photo, but we've had a significant family upheaval since that photo was taken. So I guess now is as good a time as any to talk about that. When I said I was going to try and put things chronologically, this occurred over the last 40 years. So I was actually sexually abused in my family, and I thought I was the only one until a couple of years ago, when my sister had a bit of a breakdown and she divulged that she was also. Her experience was a lot different to mine. She had a period of 5 to 6 years where she was abused in, and that actually really hit home to me because of how much she went through. And when I talked, did I mention prevenient grace at the start? I was going to. That was kind of like, that. If I was to call my holiday anything, it'd be prevenient grace. God's been watching me for the whole time. And I couldn't quite figure out why not my sister as well. You know, like, why did she have to have that suffering? So it's still a question I don't know the answer to, but I also know that God doesn't look at suffering and go, you know, he actually suffers along with people, whether you recognise it or not. So, yeah, that's the kind of upheaval that our families had. So I'll talk to some of my siblings, but not others. That's just the way it is. It's not, I don't hate anyone. There's not unforgiveness there. It's just some people are a bit grown up about it and other people are not. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my family. This was where I went to, this is the high school phase. So, yep, that's me. I think I'm in grade 8 there. I went to Concordia College. This period of my life, the schooling it's very special in a way because it introduced me to some things that stayed with me throughout life. One of the, I'll show you this because it's quite funny. So this is my student report, some of the bits I picked out for you. So I'll let you read that. That was for, interestingly enough, like a Christian education subject. And that was also for that subject, and they're almost identically different. So, like, what they said in one is completely off, and that was in the same year. So, I thought that was funny. This was a boarding house report because I was a boarder. This pretty much did not change the whole time. I was told I was messy right from the get-go. And, this was for home ec. I particularly like this one. I don't know what manipulative skills are, but I got high ones that and the same year I got low ones, so I don't know what this manipulation skill is, but I don't see it as a good thing, but anyway, it was worth reporting on. And this was in my high school yearbook. So we all had, someone put in a little bit of a story about us, and this is what they wrote about me. And again, you'll notice what does a tidy cube look like. Cube is what we used to live in. So in our dormitory, they were called cubes. So they made reference to the fact that after 5 years, I still couldn't keep it clean. So there we go. But the biggest part about my schooling was this place. This is actually one of my favourite places in the whole wide world. I grew up a lot here. So this is Ballon Outdoor Education Centre. So part of my schooling, the year before I hit grade 10, my school decided to invest in an outdoor education centre. So all the year 10 students would go to this outdoor education centre. The first year they did it, they only went for 2 weeks. The second year was the year I went, and they sent the kids out for 4 weeks at a time. So we went out for a whole month and lived out there and did things out there. I loved it, and I went on to work there. Where's Brock? This is the tree I climbed. I was telling the group last week that I climbed a 20-metre high tree. It was even harder to get down. So what we used to do is the kids would climb it, but in order for the kids to climb the tree safely, someone had to climb it unsafely, and that was usually me. So I'd climb up, I'd put some ropes around the top of the tree branches, put a carabiner on, thread a rope through, and then I'd abseil down. But then at the end of the day, I'd have to climb up, unhook it all, and then climb down without a rope. So, 20 metres high. That was my view from up there, and if you can have a look, there I am, up there. That was at the Outdoor Education Centre. Ballin, it's near Chinchilla. Yeah, in the forestry, as you might guess. So yeah, that's the view from, I think, halfway up that view, and then, you got the... so this is one of the activities that the kids used to do. It's called survival. It was so much fun for us I should say, I went on to work there, I did say that. So when the kids came out, one of the things that they would work up to was survival. And it was our favourite thing to do, to invent a plane crash scenario, and we would come and wake them up at like 1 o'clock in the morning in the dark, blindfold them, put them in a troopy and take them to a location. And they would find at that location logs like that, a few tarps, food supplies, and they would have to survive. And so when it became daylight, they would have to build something to live in. And this is one of the things they built. So they live in it for about 3 days. So we also had a high ropes activity. This is me helping someone through the high ropes. There I am. Some of the other activities I did while I was there with the staff was I actually climbed Mount Tibrogargan. So I think we climbed up something like that sort of a pattern. It was a lead climb, so we were actually physically using ropes and putting protection in rock and climbing. And that's halfway up. I took the photo, so that's why I'm not in it. This was before you had selfie sticks. Not that I would have carried one up a mountain. This is the crew of the people I used to work with. So it became quite like family out there. I still keep in contact with 6 of those people via Facebook. You remember I said about my little brother, how easy he was to convince to do stuff? This was me convincing him that this was a good idea. So around about this time I don't know if anyone remembers the Solo ad on TV. Yeah? This is Solo Man. So he's in my kayak, and I've convinced him that he can be Solo Man. And I'm taking the photos from the bridge, and that's my friend Kim over there with her kids. And he was really scared. He thought that he was going to go like a submarine right under the water and then pop out. He was quite concerned that in the middle of that he would turn over. But that's as exciting as it got. He just popped into the water and but yes, I liked convincing him to do things. After I finished at that outdoor education centre, so I was there for about 3 years. Did a few different things, like we did a lot of mustering, so I did cattle work, hiking. We went and did some whitewater canoeing at one stage. I can't think what else I did while I was there, quite a few different things. I always wanted to have stories to tell. When I was little, I didn't want to have a boring life, and so I tried to fit as many things in as I could. So after that, I moved to Sydney. This is the cover of the 1999 Refidex. Became my best friend. Before moving to... Sydney is a really epic story. Before I moved to Sydney, I'd only ever driven in Toowoomba. That was my biggest city. So I learned to drive, out west, I guess. Had a little bit of driving instructor lessons, and then I drove myself to Sydney. Put all my belongings in my little laser with the kayak on the roof, and so much stuff packed in like that if I turned the corner too fast it'd all fall on me. And I went to get to a job down in Sydney. I had a job in outdoor education. I'd lined it up before I left. I had done phone interviews and whatnot. But I had a little bit of time before I started, and I thought, oh, well, I've got this bit of time extra. I'm going to go down and catch up with some friends. So I found out some friends of mine were having a 21st birthday party at Albury-Wodonga, which is on the border. And it was like a weekend get-together, camping trip. And so we were all having a great time at this party, all camping out at Lake Hume. And it was on the last night, and we're all sitting around the fire, and I hadn't got accommodation. So I was moving to Sydney with all my things, thinking I'll just rock up and there'll be something somewhere for me to stay. You teenagers who are listening, please plug your ears, because this was the dumbest thing I've ever done. So I had nowhere to stay, but I thought it would be easy. How big is Sydney really? Like, it's not that big, surely. And so I went to Albury-Wodonga. Last night that I was there, my friend Lachlan, these people I hadn't really known, okay? They were people I'd met on the Young Endeavour. And so I'd known them for a period of 10 days, and then the only contact we had was via, I don't know, letters, or did we have mobile phones? I think we may have, just. So there certainly wasn't Facebook to keep up with each other. So, we didn't really know each other that well, but I went to spend the weekend with him. So Lachlan happened to mention that he was going to Sydney the next day. He had to go back. He had said, we're all saying where we had to drive to. And Lachlan said, I have to go back to Sydney. And I'm like, you live in Sydney? Because I knew his address, but I didn't know that he lived in St Ives. I had no idea that was in Sydney. I just thought he lived in St Ives. There's suburbs that are part of the bigger picture. I didn't even know that. So this was pretty naive me. And I said, is it okay if I stay at your house for a bit? And he goes, I'll have to ask Mum and Dad. And I'm like, what? You live with your mum and dad? I'm like, and we were like 20. And I was like, who does live with their mum and dad at the age of 20? And I'm like, okay, well, can you ask them? And he's like, yeah, I'll ask them. So he asked, and they said yes, and it was all fine. But I was totally blown away by the fact that a 23-year-old lived at home with their mum and dad. I know why now, because you can't afford not to. So, it was just a real mind-opener for me. We'll see what the next slide is. I'll go back. Okay, so we'll go. Just stick with that one for the minute. I followed Lachlan to Sydney. Found his house in St Ives, which is up north of, away from the city. Sort of if you follow Pacific Highway, it's a little bit to the north of Sydney. And I stayed there for, I think, 3 months while I tried to find somewhere. So this was going to be easy, don't forget. And I was just so lucky that his parents took me in. Lovely people. And just took this wayward person that just ended up on their doorstep. And not only that, is that while I was there in Sydney, I turned 21. And they threw me a party. I had roast dinner that night. Like, as in, when I say threw me a party, I didn't know anyone, so they weren't going to invite people, but they put a nice dinner on for me, and gave me presents. Like I've still got one of the things they gave me, which was really practical. It was a nice backpack, and it wasn't cheap, and because I was into the outdoor education sort of stuff, so they gave me something I would use, just really looked after me. Didn't charge me rent until I could afford to pay it. And then, so eventually I found a place. And on the left-hand side there, that's the place I lived in. It was actually a built next to a church. It was for the minister to live in for that church, but they had somewhere else to live, so the church rented it out. We lived in it with 4 other people. I have no idea who they were. I very rarely saw them. We kind of came and we went. So, but I took that photo because right behind is that TV tower, and I was reminded of the Castle movie. And he looks back and he goes, I just look at that and I just see how far man's come. And I just took that because it reminds me so much of it. This is one of the adventures I got into as a result of being down in Sydney. So this is Starlight Canyon. We went canyoning, me and my friend. That was probably the tiredest I've ever been pre-kids. Post-kids, nothing compares to it. But it was around the Olympics time, so this was the year after, and I'd left Sydney and come back to do this. But yeah, this is the journey. We'd been up all night the night before, basically, had a few hours sleep, and then decided we'll go and do this canyon. So this is one of the abseils down into the canyon. That's me there. Oh, I'm wearing something that's reflective, so that's why it's showing up as glowing. So I went down into this canyon, and it was supposed to be a dry canyon. So I don't know if you've known much about canyoning, but you have wet and you dry, and the wet ones you wear wetsuits, and it's cold, and the dry ones aren't supposed to get wet. Say aren't supposed to because that's not actually what happened. And we got to this, the people I was with had done it before, so they were like the guides, and we went through. We got to this one bit and had to lower, it was a drop of a good couple metres, and we lowered each other down on the rope. And at the bottom of this thing was a big pool of water. And they were like, oh yeah, it should only be waist deep, you'll be right. So I was like, all right, so I went first, and I'm like just lowering myself. I wasn't abseiling, I was just using the rope to lower myself. And I got about probably this high from hitting the water, and I let go, and I disappeared. And I didn't touch the bottom, and there was like, so much water above my head, and there was, I don't know how much below, because I didn't actually touch the bottom, and it was freezing. And I came out, and I'm just like, yep, okay, quickly pass me the gear, because the plan was to throw the gear down and I would take it out, but I couldn't do it because it was so cold. So I nearly got hypothermia from that little adventure. We finished probably about midnight, and I think we must have looked like we were thugs or something, because we stopped at this servo and they all looked at us kind of strange. So this guy here, I put this in because his name's Jimmy Barnes, and he's a pastry chef who plays the guitar. And he was at one of the centres I used to work at Coleroy. This is another photo from one of the adventures I got up to. This is kayaking the Mile River, just outside of Newcastle, I think. And there we all are with our kayaks. Okay, so we skipped a little bit into the future. So that was Sydney. But we'll just go back. With regards to Sydney, it was just the most surreal situation. I went into Sydney not having anywhere to stay, and I just happened to ask someone, and they just happened to be able to give me somewhere to stay. They just happened to be nice people. They just happened to be able to let me stay in that room, rent-free, and support me, with regards to, they didn't know me. They wouldn't have a clue who I was, and yet they let me into their home, just on the pretense that I knew their son, and didn't know him very well. The first weekend I was in Sydney, I went down to Darling Harbour, and we had spent the weekend on the Young Endeavour because it was visiting, and while I was on the Young Endeavour, I was putting a knife away in a drawer, in the kitchen galley, and there's this drawer that had like a handle shaped like that, and there's a door, everything's stainless steel, and I don't know, my experience of stainless steel is it sticks, so I was expecting this drawer to kind of stick, and I pulled it really hard, and I pulled it with these 3 fingers, and that finger got jammed in between the handle and the door that was open, so it sort of got hit. And you know when you hurt your fingers, it hurts, hey? So what do you do when you hurt your fingers? You go like that. So I had a knife, and I was putting it in the drawer, and I went, oh, that's not good. So I spent the first weekend in Sydney that I was there in St Vincent's Hospital, getting stitched up. While I was in St Vincent's Hospital, you got to remember that I had absolutely no experience of the outside world apart from like Toowoomba. It's not much of an experience. So for starters, I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't let me into the hospital. So there's a double door, and inside that double door was a waiting room, but you had to sort of get let into that room for starters. And then there was just a waiting room, and that's all there was. And I went over to the window and I said, "Can I see someone?" And she's like, looks at me and goes, "What for?" And I'm like, well, duh, it's like pretty obvious I need to have someone look at my hand. Just take a seat. And I'm just like, this isn't what I'm used to. But anyway, I sat there for ages and ages and ages, and finally someone come out and saw me, and then they went away, and someone else came out and saw me, and then they directed me to the next spot, which was inside the hospital, and there's these chairs lined up like this, and I'm sitting there, and next to me is 2 police officers over there, and there's a person in a wheelchair in handcuffs, and they're going like this, and I'm just like, what have I done? Like, what have I let myself into? And then while I was there, someone came in from a wedding with a broken arm because there'd been a big fight at a wedding, and I'm just like, who are these people? So that was about the time I rang Mum and said, "Hey Mum, guess where I am?" My poor mother. So, you know, that was one of the experiences I had in Sydney. So I went to the hospital. I frequently got on trains and got around the city on trains and that. After I had left Sydney, and some years later, like when I moved to Yeppoon, I was watching a series called Underbelly. Has anyone ever heard of that? So around about the time that they showed Underbelly, where it was in Sydney, that episode, how they had all, I think it was the, I can't remember the names of the people involved, but Benji was one, as Benji was the hitman. Does anyone want to fill me in with other names? Anyway, that was all actually happening while I was in Sydney, around about the time that I was in Sydney, and I had no idea, like, and even that hospital was the one that they took someone to who'd been shot and things like that. So there was just so many instances of, I guess, narrow escapes of things or not being exposed to things that I could have been exposed to. And just there was another episode of a real true crime show I saw, and this person had been gang raped, and that happened on a train line that I used to get on, you know, and things like that around about the time that I was down there. So there was a lot of things like that, and he just all added up to God watching out for me. So I moved, after finding out that I couldn't sustain living anymore in Sydney, I had to move back home. So I had to move back in with Mum and Dad because I'd used up all my savings, and there was no other option. So I got a job in a service station. Jobs were really easy to find, hey. I had no trouble at all finding a job. I'd walk in, I'd say I need a job, and they'd go, "Yes, can you start on Monday?" I'd never had an interview. People just gave me jobs, and I've still got no idea why. Like, you know, I just can't believe how easy they were to get compared to what people have, the trouble people have nowadays. I got a job at a servo. I hated it. I didn't like my boss. I got to the point one day of telling her in no uncertain terms what I thought of her, and it didn't happen, thankfully. But after that experience, I thought I need to look for somewhere else, and I thought about outdoor education again. So I used to work at Ballon, which was near Chinchilla, and while I was there, I met this other, director. So he used to run a different outdoor education centre, and I thought maybe I should give him a call. Anyway, that day, The day I decided I was going to give him a call, he rang me out of the blue. And I was like, I was going to give you a call today. And he said, well, I'm calling you to ask you if you're interested in a job. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I was going to call you, see if you had any going. So that was pretty much another job I just fell into, and, got a job out there. So this is me out there at that job. I used to take groups of kids hiking. Believe it or not, that person was actually happy to be there. I don't look it in that photo. So this is Greg. This is Greg the lizard. We found him. We called him Greg. So, bearded dragon. So, I used to have a dog. His name was Samson, and I never cut his hair. It rained, and I decided that I was going to get my kayak out because there was no creeks or anything there, and paddle in a puddle. And he joined me in my kayak. The puddle was about this much longer than the kayak, and the hook. 20, something like that. 21, 22, something like that. Maybe even 23. Who knows? Something in my 20s, early 20s. And the horse thought they'd come down and have a look, and someone took a photo of it for me. So this is the outdoor education centre that the second one. It's called Mount Binga, and it's still operational. It's near Blackbutt. So in that vicinity, there's quite a few. There's Googa, if anyone wants to look them up. Mount Binga and Ironbark, all sort of in the same area. We used to have chores of the morning, and one of the chores that they had to do was make their own bread. So there they are, working up a sweat in the kitchen, kneading their own bread. And there's a slide later that I'll show you where we baked it. This is some girls doing the washing in their washing machine. Yep, so that thing there used to come out. It'd be on a hinge and you could lift it out. Put the clothes and the suds in, and then they used to pump it up and down to agitate it. We also had one of those old-fashioned ringers, and you'd put the clothes through and turn the handle and wring them out. That was part of the charm of this place, was to do things as old-fashioned as we could with the kids. We had real washing machines, just by the way. So this is Big Bertha. Now, Big Bertha is that black thing there, not the person standing there feeding. That's Rachel. So this is Big Bertha. And that's where we used to cook our bread and biscuits and things like that the kids used to make. I had 2 ovens and the fire pit. And every morning, if you got rostered on who had to light Big Bertha, and Big Bertha had to be lit at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we used to have a bit of by a staff member. And you used to have this bit of a competition to see how hot you could get Big Bertha by the time everyone woke up. This is how hot Big Bertha got when I lit it one day. Actually put the roof on fire. So we had a fire. Possibly shouldn't have gotten Big Bertha that hot that day. But yes, fire. We were lucky enough to have a rural fire truck nearby, and it got put out before there was too much damage. But yeah, so this is not 3 kids putting their heads in a fire. This is, or 4 kids rather, because there's one at the front. So this is how they used to get hot water for showers. Water would come in through this tap here, and it would go through all of those pipes, and then out. And there's a big tank sitting up on top of their head, and they would have to light the fire and get it going so they had hot water. That was another way we used to try and make them appreciate things. A couple of adventures abseiling. I'm not in the photos, but taking them. It's the stuff I used to do. Up there is where I completely severed my my cruciate ligament, anterior cruciate ligament up there. So I was playing football not up there, but I was playing football and I heard it, and I repeatedly heard it, but this is where it finally snapped. And all I did was stood on a rock the wrong way, and I just went down, and I had to get stretchered out by ambulance from the top of that rock there. That's it. Yeah, I know, right? They were all right. It was the nurses at the hospital that were brutal. So that's at Maidenwell Falls. I guess near Nanango, Kingaroy area. Yeah. I think that's near Gympie, maybe. Not sure. Can't remember that one, but that was just a bit of fun to do on a weekend. Oh, this is also me. Pinched some kid's bike and went for a ride. Wear helmets, even when you're being silly. Another adventure I had, so this was with the same abseiling guy in the last photo. There's a radio competition with CFM in Toowoomba, and they had a competition, Battle of the Sexes, I think it was. And Hamish was one of the people, and he lost. And his challenge for losing this Battle of the Sexes was to abseil forward down the side of the Grand Central in Toowoomba, which is the major shopping centre there. This was just post me getting out of a full leg brace after doing the anterior cruciate ligament. So there I am helping him in his tutu. It's not very flattering, by the way, men in tutu wearing abseiling harnesses. Not at all. So this is coming up to one of the last adventures I had before I came up here and had kids. I was living here at the time, but I'd gone away on holidays. So this is taken from Rottnest Island in Perth, or off Perth. I love it. It's just so pretty. These are photos of photos, so I'm sorry about the quality. They're not great. I'm somewhere in that tank, and that is a shark. Oh my goodness, you were there too? Yep. You saw a shark? I was swimming with sharks. Yep. So one of those is me, I think, and there's some sharks. What did it feel like? What did it feel like? Scary? So we're given a bit of a brief before you go into the shark tank. So my friend Mark, who I was staying with over there, he works at the aquarium, and he has so many free dives, and he decided that he's done enough. He doesn't need to do any more, and he gave one of his free dives to me. So I actually got this for free. And when we go, it's just snorkeling around the tank, and so you're snorkeling in the shark tank, and we're told that no sudden moves. And it is very, very hard to not do sudden moves when there's a shark right up underneath you. And it's like, no sudden moves, no sudden moves. And keep moving. It's really quite frightening. But anyway, it was good fun. So this brings me to my next adventure. Have a guess what that is? Getting married. Yep. We actually got married in that place where I said was one of my favourite places, or my favourite places. So that's the suspension bridge. That's the doorway to the church. This was out at Chinchilla at the outdoor ed centre that I used to work at. So that's where we got married. You can't see it, but in behind there, just beyond the side of the photo, there's actually the shack where I used to live when I was living there, for some of the time that I was there. So that's where we decided to get married. That chapel is actually from the old Douglas Chapel. It was moved from Douglas in Queensland to this outdoor ed centre, and then, Douglas Lutheran Church Chapel. Now it's just recently been relocated because they've closed this centre down out to Gugga campus, so it's out near Blackbutt now. one night, or when I was living in the shack over here, this was before I got married, but I just thought I'd throw it in. I was doing some cooking, so I turned on the oven, and I was waiting for the oven to heat up. And it was one of those old ovens where you got the hot plate, like the circular hot plate thing it's a coil, and out through the coil came this snake. It got too hot, and it was curled up around the oven space, and it got too hot, so it came out. So I had to relocate the snake. So that's just a bit of an environment that I used to live in. Snakes and all sorts of things. And that's our house, where our house got built. Before we built it. They had to take that down and put underground power lines in. But yeah, that's the block. And there we have a little baby Annika. So the start of our family. I love this. Look at that. Look at that cross face. Yeah, Warren's a fiery. There's cross Annika and cross Gemma. They're both sad with each other. I love it. It's great. It's a great photo. And then we had Jaden. That's another photo of us. Yeah. And then we've got a couple more. We've got grandkids now, so that's Javea. She's got a lot more hair than that now, and that's Lethan. So there they are with their nana. So that pretty much, there's a lot of left out, a lot of adventures that I haven't shared, but I ran out of time with collecting photos. But yeah, I guess what I wanted to show you is and I would have liked to put one more photo up, but I couldn't get it because it was in iOS format and it wouldn't come across to my non-iOS material. But it's actually a photo of, it's a landscape photo, and it was taken recently at, I went away to Boona to do a course down there, and it's called Vital Training, so it's with a company called Vital Projects, and it's just I can't really explain what Vital is. It's learning how to do action-based learning. So you're learning to get groups to teach them things in an action-based environment. But really, it's a lot about self as well. So learning about self. One of the things they did with us is toward the end is they blindfolded us and put us in a troopy. Or a bus, no, it was a bus, and took us somewhere. And we didn't know where we were going. We got told we were going to a magic show. And had our face painted and everything for this thing. And when we got out of the bus, we were positioned on seats, and so ready for the magic show to start. And then we were asked to take off our blindfold. And the very first thing that I saw was this sunset. So that was the magic show, because the sun's got a disappearing act, so it goes down. Anyway, and sit and reflect on that for a bit. I would have loved to have shown you that, but maybe I can show you on another device one day. But I took a photo of that because it showed, I got a real good clear glimpse, or even like God speaking to me directly of this is what your life's going to look like from here on in. So really, really close. So it went down into a valley without going into too much detail. There was a pointy bit in the middle where a mountain was sticking up rather painfully, and I think God showed me that it's not going to be easy. There's going to be parts in your journey that's going to be hard. But as I looked a bit harder, I could see this road that went up the mountain so it was like, yes, it'll be painful, but there's a way through it. And then off into the distance where obviously heaven is, because the way the cloud formation and the sun setting, I got that sort of imagery out of it. But another thing I sort of got out of that whole experience was trust. And when we were blindfolded, I just had this whole sense of it really doesn't matter what happens next. And even though I was thinking more about human relationships and I was thinking about the person who was taking us through all this, his name's Russ, by the way, and I met him a long way back in my journey at Ballina Red Centre. That's where I met Russ. He came to do some work with us out there. But I was thinking about, it doesn't matter what happens next. I know he's got my best interests at heart. And I thought, well, that's, a lot what God's like. And I thought about, I've heard the stories about how Peter and James and John just got up and just followed Jesus. And I'm like, well, that took an awful amount of trust in Jesus. But Peter, James and John are no different than any one of us. Jesus picked ordinary people. And what's the difference is who Jesus is. Like when you're in the presence of Jesus, you can do nothing but trust him, because his presence commands that. So I was just like, it doesn't really matter what happens because Jesus has got my best interests at heart, my emotional best interests, my growth best interests, all those best interests. He's got not just financial. It's not. See, I kind of looked at that story as like, you just have to give up all you got financially, but it's a lot more than that. It's giving up and trusting Jesus with everything, like your growth, your relationships, your your emotional health and well-being. There's so much more that he commands just by his presence that you can trust him in that. So that was just something I got out of that, and I would have liked to have shown you that slide, but anyway. So that about wraps it up. That was my holiday. Here's to another one.